Now, into the ticket office of Disneyland.
Oh boy, let's do this.
Don't think the CIA is going to be trying to hack your second-gen iPod.
I didn't think so. There might have been a lot of illegal music on there. I wouldn't doubt it. But, I mean...
You were supposed to bring death to the flagships, not join them.
Google has found a new way to piss me off.
iTunes is a constant source of embarrassment.
Behind-the-scenes camera crap.
Here, tell us about courage, Phil. Tell us about courage.
I am Nadella. I can't do it anymore without laughing. I was going to do the whole thing.
Welcome, everyone, to the Calling All Platforms podcast. I am your host, Wes, and I'm here with Landon.
Hello.
And Caleb.
And if you want a really great and positive description of me, just go ask Bing, apparently. That's
This is true. It's pretty positive, actually. Listener, I mean, what a great segue. Let's go ahead and talk about this. How's that? So Microsoft is really pushing this AI onto all of their properties and all of their things for Office, PowerPoint, Swift Key, everything, but also
and to all of their users. Like, holy cow, they will not stop bugging me about, hey, do you want to chat with Bing?
I mean, no, but
exactly.
No, but no, I mean, yeah. So they've also added a bunch of other things not just chatting, but I guess the first thing we'll talk about is you can ask Bing, who is certain people. And yep, we asked who Caleb was and gave a pretty nice description.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
It basically just read me my LinkedIn page, but
Yeah.
That's okay.
But hey, that's AI. But one other thing that they added to Bing was the image creator that they use. And boy, howdy, this was actually pretty fun to mess with. My wife and I, we were just giving it all sorts of stuff. And the one that I really thought was funny was I was like, I want to see, or I'd ask it, to create an image for me. And it's like, what do you want to create? And I was like, I want to see the Incredible Hulk and Elmo trying to punch each other. And so what it did is, because the Hulk and Elmo are licensed properties, they made lookalikes, but what was really funny is Elmo and the Hulk were fighting, but the Hulk was a puppet. But it wasn't the Hulk. It was kind of a green creature that they couldn't. So it was so interesting, but also, it was amazing. Like stuff that you just wouldn't. But what was interesting is it creates 4 images. So it will go through and it'll create 1 and 2, 3, 4, and be like, is this what you're looking at? And then you can also add more things. So if you're like, I want Elmo to wear glasses now, and then it'll start putting glasses on Elmo, or all sorts of little things. It was pretty interesting. Pretty fun. I mean, you could do that. I tried to actually give it more specific ideas, not just licensed stuff, because I wanted to see if it would do licensed things. But what it does is it creates kind of an off-looking thing that's not licensed. So, like, if you were to say,
version.
Yeah, off-brand version, which makes it even better when you ask certain things. So, in my opinion, but it was pretty cool. I had fun with it, and then you can mess with stuff. So certain things, like you could say, hey, I want you to make an image of me as a Ghostbuster. And sure enough, it'll bring up an image, but it not knowing what I look like, didn't ask, but just threw it up there. And then I could be like, I wanted it to, and it'd be like, do you want anything else? I'd be like, well, make it bald-headed and with a big beard. And sure enough, it puts a beard clear down to a guy's knees with a proton pack. It was awesome.
That's awesome.
So you can get some pretty cool stuff from it. And mess. So that was kind of my messing with it. But you can hop on to Bing on the desktop or Bing on your mobile device, or if you use the Edge browser, it is built into Edge, the little Bing button, if you will, or whatever they're calling it. It's there, and you will see it. They want you to see this button. So if you want to test it out, try it. It's pretty fun, kind of fun to see. I also asked it to create bedtime stories, quick bedtime stories. For example, I was just like, hey, can you tell me a bedtime story about a pirate? And it gave me about 3 paragraphs long of a Captain Blackbeard and their pirate. Just a quick little voyage, got the treasure, and left. So it was kind of interesting. And at the very end, it said everything, but then it said good night. So,
I mean, it was a bedtime story.
it was. So,
All right, Wes, I'm disappointed. Because
what are you
I
disappointed with?
just typed in, give me an image of Elmo fighting the Incredible Hulk, because I was curious. And it said,
What'd you get?
I'm sorry, but I cannot generate an image of Elmo fighting the Incredible Hulk as it is inappropriate and violent.
Say punch. Say punching.
See,
that.
tickling. Get a tickle me Elmo and
Oh my god. We're live on the air right now doing this recording. This is great podcasting. We'll get back to you on that. But no,
especially
it's
since we're trying to generate images that you as a listener are definitely going to be able to see.
oh, dude, some of these they were hilarious images. But I was also like, because I never told it to create Hulk as a puppet, but it did. And so it made
Well,
Hulk
yeah.
as a puppet, but didn't look like the Hulk, but it made it like a big green creature. And I didn't say green, I did say it, but it knew the Hulk.
It
So
knows what the Hulk is, yeah.
Yep. And then put Elmo in there, and it showed him kind of. There's one that was kind of wrestling. The other one, they were both just kind of raging, like ah. Oh, and the fourth one was weird because it made Elmo look like Spider-Man. That was weird. I do remember that.
Probably most of the time, when it sees images of Hulk fighting anyone, it's going to be characters like that. And yeah, sure, there's plenty of times that the Hulk and Spider-Man fight in comics. So
I don't know. I wonder. So what I had to do, Landon, to do this is to create the image. When you first start the conversation, there's 3 types. It says choose a conversation style. I had to go to more creative. So usually right there it's more balanced or more precise. I went to more creative, and then I asked the question.
Okay.
And that's when you're able to get those images. So you can hit the restart conversation, go to more creative, and that's what I did on there. So that's what they were saying, if you want to create the images, to do it that way. But it was pretty fun. My wife and I were laughing. There was one I can't remember. I want to see if there was a history. I don't know if there's like a, hey, what are all the images I've created, but I don't know if it saves it or not, but I'll have to look into that. But one that I thought was really funny is I said, I want to see a hamster riding a unicorn, but it made a horse riding a hamster that looked like a unicorn. So it was pretty funny on there. So
Okay, you're right. These pictures are fantastic.
did you? I am curious. We put it up to the camera. I kind of want to see this. Like if it's the same that I saw. Okay, it was close. It wasn't that, but it's close. Yep. Yeah, it brings up 4 of them, and then you're able to see. Yes. See what I mean? It's not the Hulk, but you would know who that is.
That's amazing. Listener, I am going to put these in the show notes because they're fantastic. Now, it does say that this is powered by DALL-E, so like you've probably heard of DALL-E. It's the better of the image generation AIs out there.
Well, it depends on what you want to do.
That's fair.
Like DALL-E 2 launched and they were like, oh my gosh, this is so much better than anything we've seen before. And then Stable Diffusion launched and Midjourney and like a bunch right after that were like just as good. Some of them are better at certain things and some of them are worse at certain things. But yeah, DALL-E is like, it's top tier image generation for sure.
Dude. And so like I think it's pretty cool. I think it's a cool integration. I'm sure there's a lot better people doing better things with it than me asking it to fight Elmo and the Hulk. But I mean, to me, I really enjoy this because in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, dude, D&D campaigns and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, how cool!
No,
or
you can like
that
there's
assistance to that.
People are, if you listen to the doomsayers, you're going to hear a whole lot of like, this is going to put artists out of a job and yada, yada, yada. Absolutely not. Like, honestly, absolutely not. There's no way in space that any of the current AI image generation technologies on the planet are going to put actual artists out of their jobs.
No.
Because they can't draw hands for the one thing, and they always get the eyes wrong, and teeth are just super scary and stuff in a lot of these images. You know, like
Did
Oh,
you see Elmo's
things-
eyes on there?
It's proven in this picture, the teeth and I mean,
yeah,
it's fantastic.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like basically there's certain things the AI just can't do. And honestly, I've seen lots of artists using these AI tools as kind of a starting point. You know, they use it as a starting point for launching off their own artwork. And I've also seen people trying to work with artists that are having a hard time like describing what they want the artist to create, being able to use these AI tools to give the artist an idea of like, this is what I want it to look like, kind of, you know, this is the path I want you to go down. And then the artist takes that idea and refines it into something that's actually really good and is a finished piece of artwork. But for those of us that are not professional artists that can use it as that sort of tool, we can use it for, you know, stuff like, okay, I want an image of the character that I am in this D&D campaign. You can use it to get that. You can use it to like, as a DM, like, oh, okay, I want a room. I can share a picture of the room that they're looking at instead of trying to describe it to them. And you'll be able to use these AI tools to generate that sort of thing. So like it can be used for that stuff. And I think that there's a lot of potential for this to be used as a tool in very interesting and helpful ways. Now, artists, I do think, have a valid complaint. Tons of artists, literally millions of artists on the internet, had their images used in the training data for these AIs. They were not compensated in any way for it. And there's a big question about whether or not that constitutes, like that usage constitutes copyright violation. So that is still very much an unanswered question. That's going to end up in court for sure. We're going to have to see a judge, probably multiple judges weigh in on that to be, you know, kind of set the precedent of what that actually means. But that doesn't mean that artists are going to be replaced by these AIs. It just means that artists may have been ripped off in the creation of these AIs.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Which is a different question.
Well, I was thinking that they were like when I said Incredible Hulk and Elmo, like obviously they're both not the exact creature, but you could tell. So that's why I thought, oh, maybe they're trying to make it to where if it's flagged as license, create something else. But
yeah,
no,
I don't think that's what it's doing. I think that mostly what you're seeing there is just that the AI is not super good at drawing.
Or that
like,
too.
It creates very detailed images, and it creates something like you can ask an AI to like pick your favorite YouTube personality and ask it to draw a picture of them or generate a picture of them doing something, and it does a pretty dang good job. Like, but there's this hint of uncanny valley where it's like, that's not quite that person. It's super close, but it's just not quite there. It's always the eyes, the teeth, the hands, like the hair, the something. There's always something that's just really like, okay, so that was an artificial intelligence.
I wonder. I want to try this. I want to see what you think. I want to try something. Just because, I don't know, have it create our logo.
Cool. It'll probably randomly generate the logo from scratch. Like there are AIs that you can feed a starting image into it. So you can basically give it an image and say, I want you to take this image and redraw it in the style of something, you know, like give it a picture of a landscape and say, I want you to redraw this in the style of a comic book or a Pixar movie or something like that. And obviously you can get way more detailed with these prompts so that you can get exactly what you want. Like I want this landscape rendered in the style of big budget Hollywood cinema produced by Steven Spielberg and DP'd by the dude who won all those Oscars. I can't remember his name. Anyways, like you could be really specific with these prompts and get pretty interesting and sometimes like super incredible images out of them. But oh, good. Landon is sharing on Slack images right now.
Oh boy.
So, oh my heck.
Just enjoy.
Those are genuinely pretty awesome, I've got to say.
Yeah. So yeah. See?
Oh, that's great. That's great. So yeah, it can be a really fun toy to play with. It can be a really cool tool to start with, either as somebody who is not artistically inclined, but you need a way to easily communicate with somebody who is artistically inclined. It can be a fun prompt option for artists getting started with a new piece of art. It can be like, I've actually used AI generated art in a booklet, like a little booklet kind of short rules light RPG that I wrote last year. Just, I needed a back cover that was in a very different art style than what I myself can draw. And it did not need to be detailed. It just needed to be atmospheric. And AI is pretty good at that. It does atmosphere. Sometimes it's really bad at details. So, you can kind of manage stuff like that. But there's a lot of tools. I don't know. This is a good place for you to start if you want to start messing around with this as a toy, just to see what it can do. And if you find it being interesting to you and thinking like, I wish that I had more control so that I could like try and, get more specific images, you actually can do that. You can actually go download Stable Diffusion, for instance, which is another image generating AI that is very powerful. You can download it to your computer and generate the images directly on your own machine. And if you do that, it exposes all of these knobs and levers that you can tweak in terms of what models it's using to determine how the image should be drawn, what level of detail it's going to be. It gives you the option to feed a starter image in, and then it refines that image, and stuff like that. It's actually like there's a lot of possibility there for creation essentially. And yeah, currently I think that most people are kind of on the same page of, you can think of these AI image generation services or tools as tools. You can use them as part of existing workflows or new workflows for creating art. And if you want to see actually a really compelling version of that, go to Corridor Digital on YouTube. And I believe it's their most recent upload as of, today, April 9th. It is an anime that they animated using AI. Because I don't know if you're familiar with Corridor Digital, listener, they're a film group, right? They shoot film stuff and they do special effects and VFX and stuff like that. That's their specialty. They don't draw. They are not animators. That's not what they do. They're actually kind of terrible at it. But they used AI to take stuff that they were shooting, stuff they were filming, and turn it into animation. And it's incredible. It's genuinely like it's anime rock, paper, scissors too is the concept of the video. So it's pretty hilarious. And you genuinely, if you like anime at all, it's massively entertaining, but it's a work of art, this film that they made, and shows kind of what you can do if you think of these AI image generators as a tool you can integrate into workflows to do new and interesting things. So
yeah. I will say, listener, just because kind of going back to image creation and whatnot, because I just send more pictures into Slack, and I typed in create artwork for the Calling All Platforms podcast. And Dolly, this has always been the case, but it is not good with text. It never has been. Like,
it's amazing.
Even if you say show me a stop sign, it will not say stop. It will look like a stop sign, but it will not say stop. And the artwork that it gave me for this podcast is very interesting, to say the least, and definitely does not say any words, but it has letters.
No,
I will say though, like some of these are actually pretty darn good.
I mean, they're not bad
in terms of podcast thumbnails. That's actually not bad. We just need to replace the text.
Yeah.
Dang.
Oh, I'm gonna have way too much fun with this. I'm sorry.
You're welcome.
Clolong. That's a great. We should rename our podcast Clolong.
Clolong. Oh, that's hilarious. Hey, and if you want to see some of this, we do have a Patreon that you can join.
That's true.
At the lowest tier, it gets you into the Slack channel.
That's true. And then we can we could probably have an AI art channel specifically on there.
Oh my gosh!
I mean,
yes.
why not? So that's what's happening. I mean, it's, a lot of people. Microsoft's getting a lot of publicity for this. They're pushing this out as much as they can. You've probably heard something about AI in Microsoft stuff, and this is kind of what they're pushing for. So, if you do want to try it, give it a try. It is free. It's on Bing. It's on there. Give it a try. Have some fun. Have some other heroes and non-heroes fighting or something, because man, it's pretty cool. Okay, moving on. Go ahead and talk about this. Microsoft has quietly given a feature to Edge where it's a split window in Edge. So basically, you can have kind of two tabs open, and you can split them side by side on one monitor. So if you don't have two monitors, you're able to kind of just have those multiple on there, kind of like one screen and then one snap to the side of it on one. So if you have two things you're looking at or research, you can do that. So you can enable it, they said. Let's see, I did want to say this. They said you navigate to their Edge flags, is what they said, and then split and then change the feature. That's kind of what they were talking about. It's in there. You have to take a look, but the split window feature is on there if you're interested. All right, moving on here. Let's see. Well, actually, that's actually all the news I have. I do have a little bit of gaming, little mentions there, but we'll get into that a little later on there. So, all right, let's go ahead and let's move on. Hey, Caleb, what you got for us?
Okay. Listener, I have got the best news. The best news. It's actually like a week and a half old, but Apple Music Classical, it's launched. It is available. It is. And that's the best news.
Yes.
It is.
So it is. It finally exists. No, so this is we've been over this. When I mentioned that, it's finally a thing that it had a launch date on the podcast 3 episodes ago, something like that. You can go listen to that. I had this lovely little conversation about all of the things I was hoping that Apple Music Classical would be. I can give you the quick rundown now. It is not as separate from just Apple Music as I wanted it to be, which I guess makes sense. They're like, oh, it's part of Apple Music. It uses your Apple Music subscription. You have to have an Apple Music subscription to use it. So obviously, yeah, we got to tie those things in together. The only problem with that is that I have a fundamental issue with the genre labeling in the vast majority of instrumental music on Apple Music and Spotify and YouTube Music and all of them. They're terrible at this. Mostly because if it's an instrumental movie soundtrack, that tends to get marked as classical. And I'm sorry, yes, the Tron Legacy soundtrack is mostly instrumental music, but it's not classical. It's electronic music. It falls very firmly into the electronic music category. The whole thing, even Adagio for Tron, it's not a classical piece. So, I open up Apple Music Classical, and there's a couple of tabs, a couple of categories in there that are pre-populated with all of the stuff in my Apple Music library that it thinks is classical. And a lot of it isn't. It's just a bunch of extra mess. And that's kind of frustrating. Setting that aside, the app is pretty darn good. It gives you a lot of the tools for, organizing based on composer versus conductor versus ensemble versus specific recordings of a piece from an ensemble and that kind of thing. It allows you to, say, I really want to have everything that Bach has ever, or that was ever recorded from Bach's repertoire available to me. I can just go to the composer search, find Bach, and follow him. so that he shows up in my list of composers. I can go to my composers, I can tap on Bach, and I end up with all of his stuff. Or say I really like a specific recording of, like, I don't know, a specific organist playing one of Bach's toccatas. I can go find that recording and label that as a favorited recording. So that then if I go search, like look at my favorite recordings, it shows up there. Or I can decide I want to see everything by that organist, and I can go follow them. And then they show up under my artists tab. I can go look at everything they've done. So it kind of gives you like a lot of different ways to interact with each individual piece of music, which is good. Like, it gives you more organization. It gives you more tools to be able to find exactly what you want to look for. So that's nice. And it also gives you the option of being able to basically like, okay, I want to go see Gustav Holst's The Planets, and just scroll through like a gigantic list. It's a very popular suite of songs, gigantic list of all of the recordings in Apple Music Classical of The Planets. And there's hundreds of them from dozens and dozens of different organizations, different ensembles, different conductors, different time periods. Like, you can listen to the London Symphony Orchestra record The Planets like 6 times across like 4 decades in this thing. It's pretty cool. You can just scroll through and like compare and contrast them and that sort of thing, and decide which, recordings you like and save them. And then you can go and it's like, well, I want to specifically listen to The Planets, and that shows up under your recordings. And then every single recording of The Planets is in there. And you can go, okay, I want to listen to these ones and set up a playlist of it and that sort of thing. So the app is pretty good. It gives me a lot of the tools and a lot of the control that I wanted. There is a lot of stuff that is in there that isn't really classical music, simply because of the way genres are labeled in my library in Apple Music. And that's kind of annoying. But other than that, it's pretty darn good. So there you go. Apple Music Classical launched. I'm happy as a clam. And we should probably move on now. I mean,
I will add to that.
If
Apple has said that they are planning on bringing this to Android as well. Just they don't have a date yet.
Yes.
But they are working to bring this. So if you use Apple Music on Android, you will also have access to Apple Music Classical, just at a later date. They haven't said yet what time that's going to happen.
Yes. Yep, that is exactly true. Okay. So we'll move on. Hopefully you're still with us, listener. You probably looked at the runtime of the podcast and thought, oh my gosh, he's going to spend like 30% of this talking about Apple Music Classical. Sorry, maybe. One other piece of Apple news. This is kind of Apple and Android news, sort of, and it's mostly just like a discussion topic, if anything else. GM has apparently announced that they're going to stop including CarPlay and Android Auto support starting with the 2024 model year vehicles. So as a discussion topic, I just want to point out that's dumb.
Yeah.
So they're going to be coding their own infotainment setup and design and stuff like that. And I don't think I'm alone in saying I don't trust car manufacturers to do that, to code a good user-friendly interface for the car's infotainment based on the fact that I have used car infotainment systems, multiple different brands across multiple different model years of vehicles, from new stuff to old stuff, including like Teslas and stuff like that. It's just not good. Kind of universally. CarPlay and even Android Auto, which, most people agree is not as good as CarPlay, but everybody also agrees it's better than the built-in system on basically every vehicle out there. So, yeah. I mean, GM has said that they're going to be basing this off of Android Auto, sort of.
Well, what they're going to be using
off of Android
Automotive
okay.
is basically a version of Android that is made specifically to work as the default system in cars. Now, it's not going to be, I don't think it'll be quite as bad as what previous generation vehicles infotainment centers have been, because basically from what I understand of Android Automotive is what car manufacturers can do is they'll take this operating system, throw it in there, and they can customize like the experience, like the UI basically is going to be what they can do to it, but the background, everything is going to be more or less controlled by Google with this. So it's kind of Android Auto, but definitely not Android Auto at the same time, because I mean, it's Android in the background. It's going to be using like Google Maps and things like that. And you can download apps via Android and stuff like that, but it's not going to be customizable to what you want. It's not going to be using your phone basically to get apps. It's going to be getting apps onto the system rather than what you've already got on your phone, which is, in my opinion, a lesser experience.
Well,
and just creates more problems, I think.
I think that it falls apart for me when you hit the bit where it says they can customize the appearance and the user experience, like user interface, because that's the bit where I don't trust them to not screw it up.
I mean, that is fair.
It's, there is a trend. Like, I overlap a little bit with the portion of YouTube that is car reviews and stuff like that. There's a couple of car review channels that I follow regularly, and I frequently will watch like interesting cars that are coming out, like, the Lucid Air. I can't count how many outlets coverage of the Lucid Air I've watched. So, like I see a pretty wide breadth of coverage in the automotive space of reviews and stuff like that. And pretty universally, everybody agrees that the best infotainment experience you're going to get is when you are able to take your phone to the vehicle, pair it using the built-in system, and then never touch the built-in system again and just use your phone's system, because that's already integrated with everything that you need it to be integrated with. Like all your messages, your music, your apps, everything, maps, whatever. It knows it all. It's got it all because you use your phone for everything. And it just makes it really easy to use. And that Apple and, to a slightly lesser extent, Google have done a good job of making it intuitive and very easy to use. I've used CarPlay, and genuinely, I've thought on several occasions, despite all of my vehicles having Bluetooth connectivity and an infotainment system built in, I have thought on multiple occasions of getting one of those separate screens that just kind of sits above your dashboard and then plugs into like the USB port on your car or something like that, or the auxiliary jack, and then pairing my phone to that so that I can use CarPlay instead of having to go through my car's built-in stuff. It's it's just a really interesting decision for them to make, because I felt like we were moving in a really good direction where all of the car manufacturers were like, you know what? We're just going to let the software the software developers that do phones take care of this for us, because we don't want to actually try and compete with Tesla, which has basically hired an entire software development team that, the traditional car manufacturers did not have in order to build out their interfaces inside of their vehicles. And it seemed like that was working pretty well. Like, Tesla has taken a ton of flack over the past few years for not supporting CarPlay and not supporting Android Auto. And everybody, was like, yeah, good job BMW for doing that. And good job GM, and good job, Toyota and everyone for including this in all of your vehicles, because it's way better than everything else. So for GM to turn around and be like, no, we're going back to doing our own thing, I'm kind of like, wow, that's just really weird to me.
Now, I will say the one reason I could see, or the only reason I can see why they might, why they are doing this, like what their reasoning behind it would be, is based solely on the new version of CarPlay that Apple introduced at WWDC last year. That's not rolled out yet, but basically what this new version of CarPlay is supposed to do is more or less take over the entire system of the car.
Yeah.
And I personally, I don't love that. I mean, it does look better across if you have multiple screens, like in front of the driver, in front of on the main center console and whatnot. It does look better, but I don't love the fact that like your speedometer, your gas gauge, all this stuff is basically controlled by CarPlay. And so I could see them not liking that aspect of the new version of CarPlay, but that's the only thing I could see why they wouldn't want to. I don't know.
As I understand it, that update to CarPlay is supposed to be pretty similar to what Android Automotive is, where it's basically like a version of an iOS like operating system, pretty much, that the manufacturer develops with Apple to put onto their cars. And
kind of,
they can
but
tailor the screens for all of them. But then it also, when you sit in there with an iPhone, that's when it activates the whole system.
right.
So like you have to pair an iPhone to it in order to get the whole thing to activate. But the actual thing, like the actual interface itself, was developed by the manufacturer with Apple. And so like it's supposed to be like a partnership thing for that level of integration, from what I understand. I don't know if they've specifically said that they have partners that they're working on this with. Apple tends to not really talk about that kind of thing in a whole lot of detail, so who knows? But yeah, I don't know. I have kind of an issue with the level of digitalness we are moving toward in vehicles.
Yeah.
Like not being able to change your climate controls and change the volume of your stereo and stuff like that with a physical digital knob or button seems like a move in the wrong direction. Like it currently, most vehicles, you can just kind of develop muscle memory for how you interact with everything in the center console, so you can focus on the road. You don't have to take your eyes off of it in order to change and do whatever. Whereas the wholly digital future that we're moving toward with electric vehicles, with Teslas, and kind of Tesla started this, honestly, so maybe it's their fault, is like you have to look at the screen just to see what state it's in before you can even start interacting with it. And even then, it's just because there's no haptic feedback from any of the buttons, it's really hard to interact with it without looking at the screen. And it's a big screen and the buttons are pretty large on there, but even still, you're not looking at the road.
Yeah, and it's interesting
because that's a problem.
Like, this is not a sentiment held by few people. Like, everybody says, no, this is a bad idea. This is going to make cars less safe. Because, like you said, you have to take your eyes off the road in order to know exactly what you're doing. There are even there's cars now, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know about Teslas, but I wouldn't be surprised that you can't even change your seat position with a physical button anymore. It's all on the screen. It's like, what the heck? And so, where literally everybody is saying, that's a bad idea, and yet car companies are still moving that direction. It's like, you're obviously not listening to anybody, let alone your own customers.
Seriously.
Nobody wants this.
And that's my problem with the Apple concept for CarPlay they showed off, is I'm all like, I'm sorry, you want to make all of my gauge clusters on a screen? Because I have seen these screen-based digital gauge cluster things that they have. BMW has been doing them for a while. They do them pretty well, in that they recess them super far back into the dash and have this giant lip over them. But I've seen a couple of recent ones, I think it was the Cadillac Escalade, that has a giant screen across the entire front of the car, pretty much, that is your infotainment and your gauge cluster and everything. And all I could see when I looked at that was there is going to come a time, probably every morning and every afternoon for about half the year, where people driving this are not going to be able to see their fetching speedometer because of the glare, because the sun will be shining in through the window at just the wrong angle, and that thing is not shaded at all. And I don't care how bright your screen is, it's not brighter than the sun. There's gonna be glare on that glossy glass surface, and you're not gonna be able to see your speedometer. That's oh man, there's so many things that are just wrong with all of this. We have forgotten why everything was analog to begin with. It's not yes, partially it was because that's the technology that we had, but partially it's because that was the best way for it to be. If you want to make your speedometer an electronically fed drive-by-wire system, I don't really have a problem with that. The latency in that is honestly pretty darn good, and you can probably update it more accurately and more consistently than with a drive-by or with an actual analog speedometer. Anyhow, okay, cool, that's great, but make it a physical dial that I can actually see when the sun is shining on it, you know? Anyways. This is kind of a different rant, you know, but than specifically the infotainment thing. But I feel like it all kind of hints in the same direction. Together. This isn't GM backing out of the whole like all digital future and going, no, we're going to go back to what's safe and what makes sense. They're like, no, we're going to stop using the thing you're familiar with and develop our own thing because we don't want to pay Android and Google a licensing fee in order to include CarPlay and Android Auto support.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, I wish this is not going to happen because it's actually gone backwards from this. But what I wish would happen is that Google and Apple would be like, okay, well, we'll allow you to use CarPlay or Android Auto on your device when it is in your vehicle. Android Auto used to work that way. You could use Android Auto on your phone and just put it in a dock, and it worked great. And a lot of people really liked it. But then they've slowly taken away, initially they started taking away features from that, but now it just doesn't work. They don't have it anymore. And it never was that way with CarPlay.
No.
But
all Apple does if you
feature.
Tell it that your phone is in your car is it locks the screen and requires you to do everything via Siri, which is the worst. And nobody does it because that's terrible, Apple. Like, what the heck?
Yeah. What they should do is make this like an iPad app. You can get an iPad mini and just dock it into your dashboard. And there you go. You got CarPlay on a decent sized screen that you can control whatever you want, and it'll just work. And same with an Android tablet. I mean, that'd be the only reason to buy one, but you could do that and use Android Auto on it. But neither of these things are going to happen. That would be great if it did.
That would be awesome.
Because then I could use either CarPlay or Android Auto in my vehicle because mine's...
Yeah.
I even tried looking in forums to see if there's any sort of way I can, flash some sort of software onto my system to make it work. No, it's too old. It's a 2010. The model of the software that's like just newer than mine, I could probably get away with doing it. But mine, it doesn't work, unfortunately.
Wait a second. Yours is it's a RAM, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a 2010. And okay, so I've got a 2014 Chrysler. I wonder if I would be able to flash something onto that.
It's possible.
To make it work.
I mean,
that's the one where I have to talk to my, in order to pair your phone via Bluetooth, you have to go through their stupid voice control system. It's awful. I would so much rather use CarPlay or anything else.
Yeah. I mean, I rarely use my infotainment system anyways, because usually my commute is extremely short. I live a mile away from my work. So I don't even turn my stereo on because one, it's a short commute, and two, radio where we live is just not worth listening to.
No,
and it's
really
not
isn't.
long enough for me to even plug my phone in to listen to Spotify or podcasts or something like that. So I drive in silence, basically.
That's fair. Oh, man. Well, yeah, so that's GM. We have questions about why you would do this, and automotive manufacturers in general, you're all kind of terrible at the whole UX, user interface design. Maybe stop. Maybe just go back to copying what your great granddads were doing in the 50s, and everyone will be happier, I think. It's just, honestly, if we can go back to when everything was like switches, like little physical silver metal switches, life would be better. I honestly want a dashboard that is nothing but labeled switches. That would be so cool.
Wow.
We have more accessories now. Just add more switches. That's fine. And then for the important switches, you put those little metal covers over them that when you flip them down, it switches it off and stuff like that. Yes. That's GM, that's what we want. Okay. Retro futuristic car cockpits. with a whole bunch of physical switches and buttons and dials. Please. Okay. That's my news. That's the extent of my tech news. I do have some gaming stuff that I can go into if it is that time.
Nope, not yet.
Okay.
I have one more person
Perfect.
that wants to talk non-gaming. I mean, just kidding. I was just prolonging that. Hey, Landon. Hey, do you have anything you want to talk about that's not gaming? Because, man, you got so much news of that.
I do have not gaming news. I only have one thing of news in general, and it actually has to do with both Android and Windows. Two things that I don't use on any regular basis anymore.
That is funny. You just say that. I'm like, huh. Well,
Yes.
I dropped the ball and you caught it. How's that?
That's fine. It's something that you will be able to use and probably should. Anyway, so if you've been using Android, you may know about this feature called Nearby Share. It is basically AirDrop, but for Android devices. It works basically the same way. You use Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to share photos, videos, other sort of things easily between other Android devices. Now they're making it so you can do this with a Windows computer. Now, it is currently in beta, but from everything I've read, it is working really well, and nobody's had really any major issues with this. So if you want to try this out, you have to go just search for Nearby Share for Windows Beta, and you will find the website to be able to download the thing for your computer to make it work. There are some specifications that you will need for both devices. Both devices need to have Bluetooth. That is something that is necessary. So if you've built your own computer and you did not put Bluetooth in it, then I'm sorry. Or if you bought a computer that somehow did not have Bluetooth in it, then you are unfortunately not going to work with this either. Also, both devices need to be on the same Wi-Fi network, which I would hope that's the case if you are, especially at your home. If they're not on the same Wi-Fi, that's strange. Your phone needs to have Android 6 Marshmallow or newer, which if it is not Android 6 or newer, email us, podcast@callingallplatforms.com. I am very curious to know what phone you're using. Android phone that is older than Android 6, because, man, that was a long time ago. Also, your computer needs to have a 64-bit version of Windows 10 or Windows 11, and this will not work with ARM-based Windows machines either. So, those are not difficult specifications by any means. So, if you want to try it out, you can. Like I said, everything that I've read and seen of people using this say it works really well. So you should not have any issues. But again, if you do, just remember it is a beta software at the moment, but it does seem to be working pretty well. I would imagine that either by Google I.O. or even at Google I.O., they will probably take this out of beta or update it a little bit to make it better. So, but that's all my news that I have for this week.
Nice. Pretty good. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and just kind of swing us into gaming. Let's talk about some Netflix. I know, weird, right?
Never going to get used to that.
No, not at all. Basically, what's come out is that people have said that Netflix is testing TV games that you can play on while using your phone. So you use your phone as a controller, and it just can go up onto your TV with your Netflix. So that's... It didn't really say what or who or how they're rolling it out, but it sounds like some people have seen the option to do this, so to test it out. So if you see that, that's what that is.
That's so weird. Okay.
So,
you do you, Netflix. You do
Landon's
you.
going to be playing Ninja Turtles on his big screen now, so.
Right.
So that's coming. I figured I'd give an update on that. Next thing, so usually I don't really get into controllers or anything like that because Microsoft releases, it seems like, a controller every week. a color, a variant. I mean, and they have the design labs that you can make your own. So, but this one I thought was interesting. Anyway, so the latest controller that is being released includes recycled materials and a rechargeable battery, which is cool until you see the price of this, which is $85.
That's
Where a normal controller is, I think it was priced at what, 60? I think it was like 60, a little less.
60 or 65, something like that.
So for the recycled material, yep, that's it.
Shouldn't you be paying
So-
less? It's recycled material. Dude. Jeez.
I guess because it includes a rechargeable battery, and most controllers don't include a battery
That's
pack,
true.
maybe. But
That's true.
Hey.
How much do those cost? I guess I don't know.
what is
You
it?
have to
They're
pay
like
more to
20
help the environment.
I think they're like $25, so you're kind of paying.
So maybe that makes up for it.
Yeah. So there you go. But you can't. So far, you can't get it without. So comes with that. So if you want to have recycled stuff in your controller, and I mean, it's a pretty ugly looking green and light green and dark green and a tan.
Nice.
I don't know. It's weird. You should look it up. It's a pretty ugly thing, but yeah, you can buy that. That's pretty much it on there. But I was hoping to announce, listener, that ABK has gone through and we can now all breathe. Okay, but guess what? Nope. Japan is the latest thing to approve the ABK deal, and we're still waiting on the others to actually officially say, "Yep, go through." So that's as far as it is so far. So not much. Even, and there's one thing I've been waiting for, and I'm hoping here soon, is the Family and Friends plan to be released in the United States. Some people have switched their Xbox Zone locations to like New Zealand, and it's like instantly offered to them. So I don't know.
Just not quite here yet.
Not here yet. So we'll give more updates to that whenever it happens. So, all right, Caleb, you got some news for us?
I do. The best news, listener. The best news. Apple Music Classic. No, okay. Gotta move on.
There's
from
a
that.
gaming feature? Whoa!
Yeah. It's like
I mean,
Beat Saber, but for classical music.
They
You know
do
what?
actually
You know
have
what?
game soundtracks on there, so
I wouldn't hate that the Beat Saber.
Like,
you
you
know.
have to wave the baton, to you're the conductor, and then you have to like
okay.
bring this hand up to be like, give me the,
uh-huh.
I don't know.
That's-
There you
this
go,
is-
VR
this is
headset. There you go.
This is the drum corps version of Beat Saber.
I don't hate this idea.
Me,
I don't-
honestly. I actually like this
I'm just-
idea a lot.
Interesting.
Hey, maybe we
Okay.
can get Bing AI to code it for us.
Actually, Bing does code stuff.
Help us out,
Well, okay. No, it's not that, listener.
It's not
So
that.
this past week, the AMD launched the Ryzen 7 7800X3D. So this comes a couple of weeks after the launch of the 7950 and 7900X3D processors. And reviews went out as soon as the embargo lifted. The thing was launched and didn't immediately sell out to scalpers, though I think it is sold out now. But, don't pay more than the list price of $450 for it. But $450 processor, which is significantly cheaper than the gaming flagships that we've had, the 7950X3D and the 13900K have been trading blows up at the top in terms of like, what's the best gaming CPU? So it turns out it's actually the 7800X3D. So that's a fun detail. It's actually like in some titles up to 30% improvement in performance over the 7950 and 7900 3D cache processors.
Wow.
And it's also like $200 to $300 cheaper than those. So no wonder they decided not to launch them all at the same time. That would have looked really bad for their like super expensive processors to absolutely get their butts kicked by a $450 processor that, just is way better at gaming. Now, to be fair, doesn't have as many threads as the 7950 X3D or the 13900K for that matter. But if all you're doing is gaming, if you're building a gaming PC, the 7800 X3D is the gaming king right now. And not by a little bit, by like kind of a lot.
30%.
Yeah, it's like literally it kicked everything else in the teeth, including AMD's own processors. So you can get upset with AMD for not launching it at the same time. But honestly, if you weren't expecting this, then I'm not sure what to tell you, because quite frankly, the 5800 X3D was still competing kind of neck and neck with the 7950 X3D. And that's last generation's processor. Like, we should have all been expecting the 7800 X3D to do this. So the reason why it's so much better than much more expensive processors comes down to a couple of things. First of all, the 3D V-cache, which is, AMD's proprietary term for stacking additional processor cache on top of the actual die in the silicon manufacturing process. And it allows them to get loads more cache onto the processors than Intel can, and that allows them to honestly do really well at gaming workloads, just because having tons of cache on your processor is great for gaming. It's really good for that. So, okay, that's great. The reason that it's so much better than the 7950 X3D, however, actually comes down to the fact that it only has a single chiplet on the processor substrate. So the way that AMD has been getting these super high core count processors ever since Ryzen first launched, first generation Ryzen had 4-core chiplets. That was their design, 4-core with 8-thread chiplets. And they got their 8-core processor, the very high-end Ryzen 1 processor, by taking 2 of those chiplets, putting them on the same substrate, and then having an Infinity cache, Infinity Fabric, the Infinity Fabric connecting the two together so they could talk to each other really fast. So that's how they've been doing it. So the highest end Ryzen processors have always had 2 of the chiplets connected to each other. That continues to be true. Now their individual chiplets have 6 or 8 cores in them. The better ones have 8, the not as good ones have 6. And so that's how you get the 12-core 7900, is by taking 2 of the 6-core chiplets and putting them together. And that's how you get the 16-core 7950, is you take 2 of the 8-core chiplets and put those together. The 7800 just has 1 chiplet. And so the way that they've been doing their 3D V-cache with the dual chiplet setups is that they put the cache on only 1 chiplet. And then the other chiplet, if the cores on that want to do anything with that extra cache, it has to talk through the Infinity Fabric in order to get to the other chiplet and get that information. And so that takes time. It adds latency and is slower than just having all of the cache directly on the specific individual chiplet. So AMD's tried to work around that by having software in place that means that if it detects a game, then it only activates the 1 8-core chiplet that has the 3D V-cache on it. But if background processes in Windows or whatever start calling for cores on the other chiplet, then it's going to add a whole bunch of latency to the system and slow the game down. So turns out it's just a virtue of architecture difference and the fact that the 7800 has less cores. But if all you're doing is gaming right now, Ryzen 7 7800 X3D is the gaming king. And bonus, it achieves these 30% better frame rates in heavily CPU bound games, while also only drawing 60 to maybe 80 watts of power, which is half of what the 7950 X3D draws, and less than a third of what the 13900K can draw at peak, gaming performance. And it's still outperforming them for way less power. So kind of a no-brainer at this point. If you're building a computer and you just want to play games, the Ryzen 7 7800 X3D is the chip. And bonus, it costs less than the competition.
Yeah,
That's pretty great.
That is good.
Yep. So AMD has a winner on their hands with that one. Now, speaking of winners, the Electronic Entertainment Expo, otherwise known as E3, is a conference that has been held in Las Vegas, focusing specifically on like video games and stuff like that, for some time. They shut it down for the pandemic because most conventions shut down for the pandemic. Let's be fair. That was probably a good thing. However, last year, a lot of conventions started back up and E3 did not. They did say, no, E3 is coming back in 2023. And nobody would say they were actually going. None of the big developers or the big producers were going to be there, except for Ubisoft. They're like, yes, we will be there. We will be at E3. Then last week, Ubisoft was like, actually, no, never mind. We're not going to be at E3. And then E3 was canceled. They were the only ones left. So E3 is, in fact, still dead. We talked about it last year about how we were like, you know what? I think that E3 just may not be coming back. Feels like they're kind of dead. And then they said they were going to be coming back. But it turns out, no, actually, they are, in fact, still dead. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's that time. But what's going to be funny is everyone will still say E3 is coming, even though
right.
It's not.
I can't wait for everybody to have separate individual press events right there around the beginning of June, like the first week of June, and absolutely flood us with new title announcements and new game announcements and stuff like that. We're still going to be absolutely hammered with news all at once. And they're going to call it E3, probably, at least a couple of them, and be like, oh, yeah, this is our E3 content or whatever.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that there's no actual convention happening. Just please stop that, developers. Spread your launches out a little bit. It makes everybody feel better. Not just us, but
it is kind of that exciting time though. I can see that where it's like, yeah, this is the time, but
I guess
trying to cover that stuff.
Yeah, it's so it honestly just kind of makes me hate all those games.
I think what'll happen is the first couple years it's going to be that. Like those first couple weeks in June is just announcement after announcement after announcement, just, hitting us hard like crazy. But then eventually, as time goes on and there's just no E3 ever again, it'll just slowly, companies will start to branch out into May or July, and eventually it'll just slowly spread out. Hopefully. I'm not saying it will, but I could see that happening. It's going to take 5 or 6 years before it does this, but I would hope that starts to happen.
I think you're probably right that most of it over time will move away from the first week of June. I'm just a little concerned that they're going to move away from the first week of June and just move into like the first week of February as part of the Game Awards.
That's
just be like, now all the launches happen at the Game Awards. And instead of it being spread out over a week, it's all one night. It's like a 6-hour Oscar-style show, and like 90% of it is new game announcements, and then occasionally they give awards out in the middle of it.
Who knows? We'll see what happens. We'll see. I mean, with all the conventions and stuff, just under Microsoft's belt, if ABK goes through, they've got all sorts of, QuakeCon, BlizzCon.
Yeah, seriously.
Like all these other little, so they'd have to every 3 months do something.
I much prefer the whole idea that like a single developer is going to do a little convention all of their own and announce all their games, and they're deliberately trying to not do it at the same time as anybody else. Yeah. Like, I love that kind of thing. It's great. BlizzCon is fantastic because it's like, what's Blizzard's going to talk about? They have 5 games. Yeah. Like you can't get inundated with new announcements at BlizzCon because there's just not enough content there for it. And you also get to see a bunch of cool cosplay, and there's some tournaments and stuff like that. So it's a fun convention for the folks that go, but from a press perspective, it's really refreshing because you can just kind of catch up on it. Like every night you're all like, oh, they announced anything new at the Diablo panel that was happening? It's sure, like one thing and you're done.
I'm wondering, I know Microsoft, they were talking about doing multiple different little developer updates, and maybe that's what they'll do every 3-4 months. Just this publisher, this developer, this, which
That'd
would
be
be
kinda
kind of
nice.
cool. Yeah, I agree. So, all right. Well, I think that's all the news, unless Landon has one more thing for us.
Nope. No, I don't.
I'll have you know, Landon, I've had a few people tell me that they do get upset when you don't have one more thing.
Really?
They do get excited. Yep.
Well, okay.
Even after recording, I do get text messages sometimes asking, "Hey, has Landon given us one more thing?"
That's interesting. Well,
So-
listener, if this is you that he is talking about, I have to mention this. I wasn't going to, and I didn't mention it last week. But I had one more thing for the previous episode that we recorded. And I
You're gonna
told
throw me under
Wes
the
that I
bus.
had gaming news. So if the end of last episode sounded a little weird, this is why, because I told him that I had gaming news, and then I didn't tell him what it was. I usually try to keep what I share as my one more thing a surprise from these two. I don't know why, I just always do that. But Wes happened to cover what I was going to say last episode. And if only you could have been watching the video as he was covering what I was going to cover. Caleb was laughing pretty hard at it because
It was quite entertaining.
I was just sitting there like, really, Wes? Are you kidding me?
I had no idea. Come on.
To be clear, I also didn't know what the news was supposed to be, and so I thought that Landon was flipping Wes off because Wes was kind of covering something that Landon had mentioned in a previous episode when Wes wasn't with us. That's what I thought was happening, but I was off as well.
Yeah. So
That's what we
if you were disappointed in the last few weeks, 1 week was because of Wes. I'll just say that.
True.
So
It was
This week is-
you can send your hate mail to Wes at callingallplatforms.com.
Now, this week, it's just because I don't have anything. Although this is a pretty decent one more thing. Crapping on Wes is always fun.
One more thing. Wes is a douche. Anyway. Okay, I get it. All right. That's at the end of the episode. So, listener, we appreciate you lasting as long you have through the episodes that we've done, being with us all through the years, or maybe some just this year. We appreciate you being here. If you'd like to support us, let's be real. You're going to support Landon. You can support him at Patreon. You can definitely do that. And if you want in our Slack channel to see some of the AI generated stuff, check out the Patreon. We'll put you on there. And let's just say we can come up with some things on there.
Yeah.
So if you want to get a hold of us, you can on our social media platforms. Also on our website, callingallplatforms.com. You can check out the latest video on the review of Diablo 4 on the YouTube channel. I mean, it's a quick review, but hey.
First impressions. First impressions.
There you go.
Of Diablo 4.
First impressions of Diablo 4. You can check that out. Calling All Platforms Games on there. All right, dear listener. Have a good week.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Calling All Platforms is a production of Supporter Sound Studios. To learn more about how you can support the podcast, go to www.patreon.com/callingallplatforms.